Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride. I'm joined this evening by two excellent guests. Firstly, by the MSP for the South of Scotland region and hoping to stand next year in the Galloway and West Dumfries constituency, Emma Harper. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Kenny. Thank you for asking me to be here tonight.
Well, thank you for being here. And on the other side, we have a new guest, Cary, who's a researcher in European politics at Edinburgh University and also a volunteer with Democrats Abroad because Kat is an American citizen. Kat, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well. So, we start this evening, as we always do, with our coronavirus statistics update. And as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 770,729 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Of these, 742,125 were confirmed negative, 28,604 were positive. There were 640 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Scotland today, and sadly, there were 7 new reported deaths of people who had had positive tests. This will, of course, be an underestimate of the total number of cases, as not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will necessarily get tested. As we always do, we urge you, if you are showing any new symptoms of a fever, a dry, persistent cough, or a change in your taste of sense and a change in your sense of taste or smell, then please do book a test as quickly as you can. Of the people who have tested positive, 137 people were in hospital last night, 15 of whom were in intensive care. And the number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 2,519. This number only includes those who died in hospital, having received a positive test for the virus. And the latest UK daily figures available show that 42,143 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 71 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just those in hospitals. And we also have reports from the National Records of Scotland for week 39 of the year, which was the week ending 27th September. In that week, 10 deaths were registered in Scotland where the novel coronavirus was mentioned on the death certificate. 7 of these had previously been reported in the Scottish Government's daily briefings. That takes the total number of deaths in Scotland directly linked to the pandemic to 4,257. The R number in Scotland is now estimated to be between 1.2 and 1.6, meaning that each infected person is likely to infect an average of that many other people. As long as the R number remains above 1, the scale of the pandemic grows exponentially. This rise, along with rises in case numbers and hospital admissions over recent weeks, is the main reason behind the recent additional restrictions imposed by the Scottish Government. And just before we go any further, just a reminder that you can download the Protect Scotland app from protect.scot. That helps with contact tracing if you are in contact with somebody who does get a positive test. The app doesn't collect any information on you. It is anonymized, so it is well worth looking into. And also, before we go any further, if you'd like to join the conversation here on Broadcasting Scotland, you can do so on Twitter by following us at BroadcastScot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. As you can see, we'll flash some of those tweets up on the screen as we go through the show. But our first story tonight, the SNP has said independence is the only way to protect Scotland's Parliament after Tory MPs forced the Internal Market Bill through the House of Commons last night against the wishes of the vast majority of Scotland's MPs. At Prime Minister's Questions today, Ian Blackford MP challenged Boris Johnson on whether he would continue to force the UK Internal Market Bill through, even if the Scottish Parliament and other devolved parliaments refused legislative consent. The SNP Westminster leader pointed to the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey published yesterday, which shows a record low of just 15% of people in Scotland trusting the UK government to act in Scotland's best interests, and said the Tory government had shattered trust further by trampling over Scotland's devolution settlement. So Emma, I'll come to you first on this. That 15% number, the people in Scotland who trust the UK government to act in Scotland's best interests, it really does make the current constitutional arrangements pretty untenable, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I mean that number that you quoted 15% is a record low, and trust is a word that is it's been used a lot recently because we know that the First Minister has really grown in the polls and support. And personally, I know Conservatives that are telling me that they trust the First Minister more than they do the current Prime Minister. So I think what's happening in Westminster right now, when we are seeing debates by Mary Black, we're seeing Ian Blackford, we're seeing Philip Whitford talk about the issues of the internal market bill. It is a total slap in the face for devolution. You know, I know people in Scotland want a Scottish Parliament, and what Boris Johnson and his team are doing right now are basically undermining the whole of the devolution settlement. So it's actually going to help us with independence when we have our next independence referendum.
And Kat, I wonder if I could draw, some comparisons here. There are obviously tensions between federal governments and state governments in the US, in Germany, and other countries. But there are ways of resolving those disputes that aren't really present in the British system. What do you make of it when you see this kind of constitutional rewriting of the Constitution on the hoof?
I think it, in part, makes me appreciate having a written constitution in the US, even though the federal government overrules state governments for the most part. Scotland does not have as many rights as the states over their federal government. And without any kind of veto, without any kind of population versus anything else kind of mixed into it, it's wildly unfair, and it's a big reason why I support independence.
Yeah. I mean, what does that look like in a kind of global context? The UK does not having that written constitution that does protect the rights of different levels of government, different types of government.
I think a lot of people don't know that much about it. So outside of the UK, so I think that not having a written constitution is seen as unfair and unworkable. And it definitely in America, you had Bonnie Greer, you had someone say on Question Time that America loves Ireland. Well, America kind of has that fighting spirit of, if you're not getting treated fair, if you're not getting your democratic say, then maybe that unwritten constitution has something to do with it.
And Emma, just to come back to that number, Ian Blackford said that this is shattered trust in the Westminster system, which, as we said, was already at a record low. But if only 15% of Scots think the UK government is working in their best interest, why are still almost half of Scots so committed to the Union?
Well, latest polls have actually, one poll I read showed that 60% of Scottish people are seeking to separate. I mean, for me, we need to make tangible, I guess, a rationale or tell people what this internal market bill means. And it's things like labelling of food produce. Our local food producers will be completely disenfranchised because of internal market proposals about food labelling, for instance. And we already have issues with promoting and protecting our food standards in Scotland. We know that the farmers, they're going to be sold down the river by this internal market bill. And that's a real concern that what I need to do is continue to share information, absolute examples that can show people that this internal market bill is basically stepping on everybody's businesses. It's going to be stepping on their ability to make choices in Scotland. So we're already seeing that this bill is totally making UK government ministers able to legislate without even the consent of the Scottish government. And so, or the Scottish Parliament, for instance, they can do whatever they want without having legislative consent approval. So So it is a real issue, and I think more and more people are being engaged, and they are coming over to the side where they see that the Tories can't be trusted, and that independence is the best way forward for Scotland, because we are gravitating towards a more European approach or a Nordic approach for health, for social care, for education, rather than the approach which might be heading down the direction of the US.
Well, we do have some more on the internal market bill. The SNP has called for an immediate apology from the Tory government following what they called blatant falsehoods peddled by a junior minister today over talks between the Holyrood and Westminster governments over post-Brexit arrangements. The Scottish Government, along with the governments of Wales and Northern Ireland, have been intensively discussing common frameworks with the UK Government, designed to manage practical and regulatory implications of leaving the EU in areas such as agriculture and food hygiene. However, on the BBC's Good Morning Scotland today, Tory Minister Paul Scully claimed that the reason we're legislating in the first place is because the Scottish Government walked away from some of the common frameworks discussions we were having last year. SNP Deputy Westminster Leader Kirsten Oswald responded, saying, "Peddling falsehoods and issuing entirely misleading comments is becoming the norm for Boris Johnson's Tory government. These remarks are not just entirely false, they also undermine the good faith in which the Scottish Government has approached these discussions." Kat, I think if I could come to you first on this. There has been more and more from Tory ministers and from other politicians around the world of just saying things that are flatly untrue, provably untrue, and not always being kind of corrected on them or not pulled up on them. What do you think's going on when we're having so many lies told and no real way to keep people in check on those subjects?
Well, traditionally, politicians do have to have a sort of leeway, because otherwise you could tell an unintentional lie. So adhering to norms and the rule of law is really important, and that's not the world we're living in right now. So it's up to voters to use their voices when they hear these lies. And I just tell people to take everything in with a skeptical mind.
Emma, we've seen this, as I said, from several ministers. This government in particular seems to have a tenuous relationship with the truth about certain things. How does a political party like the SNP challenge that? How do you make sure that people do hear the truth?
Yeah, well, I think it is really important that people do hear the truth, and often what we find out is found out through Twitter, because people will capture information immediately. They will capture when Ed Davey says England instead of the UK in video imaging that's put out on Twitter. We have had issues where Mike Russell says that the Joint Ministerial Committee meetings have been really challenging. And Michael Matheson, our Transport Secretary, when I've asked him questions about Cairnryan, the port of Cairnryan, which is the third busiest port in Scotland, what engagement has the UK government what engagement have the UK government done with the Scottish government? The answer has been none. Has been none. And Jean Freeman, our health secretary, has said that she's learned of policy changes with coronavirus restrictions from the media, rather than being told from UK government ministerial teams. So I think it's very disrespectful when the UK government makes announcements and they don't tell the Scottish government, and so we have to find out info from Twitter and other social media and the printed press. I think it just shows a complete lack of respect from the Tory-run UK government, and the quicker we can get our SNP MSPs out of there, the better.
And Emma, I just wanted to ask you about something that happened in Parliament today. Oliver Mundell was kicked out of the chamber by presiding officer Ken McIntosh after accusing the First Minister of lying. and then refusing to withdraw that word because we're not supposed to say liar or talk about lies in Parliament. I wonder how useful that rule is when we do have so many politicians, as we've seen with the Tories, telling lies, to not be able to call that out in the Parliament.
Well, I think parliamentary behaviour needs to be respected. I think we should be using language that conveys a parliament that we want people to respect. And I wasn't in Parliament today, so I didn't actually witness the event. But someone did inform me that it was interesting that the TV broadcasters were waiting for MSP Mundell when he came out of chamber, almost as if it was planned. So I'm just curious as to whether that was the case or not.
Well, we probably would need to ask Oliver Mundell himself, and he's not willing to appear on the show right now, so we'll move on. The SNP has criticised Boris Johnson for misleading the public after he stated at Prime Minister's questions that the internal market bill would open up world markets to Scottish agriculture. The SNP's shadow Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Secretary has said the Prime Minister has let the cat out of the bag about his future trade plans to allow lower quality imports into Scotland and the UK, potentially damaging Scotland's own high quality food sector. Agriculture, food, environmental and animal welfare standards are fully devolved matters, but the internal market bill would pave the way for the Tory government to impose lower standards in these areas through the power grab inherent in the bill. Deirdre Brock MP said, "It's extremely misleading for Boris Johnson to say the internal market bill would open up world markets to Scottish agriculture, when in actual fact it would betray our farmers and food production sector by allowing hormone-injected beef, chlorinated chicken and other lower standard imports into the UK. This decision shouldn't even be in the hands of the Tories at Westminster. Agriculture is entirely devolved to the Scottish Parliament." So, first of all, how does it feel that American beef and chicken are the two big bogeymen in this aspect of the internal market debate?
It feels correct. It really does. I mean, a lot of...
Go on.
A lot of things we would choose what we would buy that was organic, what we'd feed to the kids, based on how dirty or clean that meat, that vegetable, that fruit was, because it was sure to be full of hormones or really expensive.
And Emma, this is something we've been concerned about for some time, the effect that Brexit was going to have on agriculture. But this idea that somehow this is going to make the world markets open up to the Scottish government, it's nonsense. I mean, this is a bill about the internal market, and Brexit is actually closing off a lot of export markets, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just they're havering when they are presenting that this internal market bill is going to be better, because it's not. I hosted an event with two farmer experts who were helping the people that attended this virtual meeting, and it was a cross-party meeting, and I had two farmers present the issues that we will see when we have poor processing, poor production standards, which we're seeing not just in the USA but in other countries. These are the issues that the farmers in Scotland and the rest of the UK are going to face. We talk about chlorinated chicken, we talk about hormone beef. There's issues of somatic cell counts in dairy produce. There's a thing called avian leukosis, which is basically tumours on birds that has to be removed on birds, and then those birds would normally be taken off the production line. Mm-hmm. But the massive deregulation by the Trump administration has actually opened up poorer quality production and processing, and that is what we are going to be faced with in this country. It's cheaper imports, and our farmers in Scotland and England will have a real challenge to compete with bottom level pricing. We don't want a race to the bottom. We want to promote and protect our fantastic Scottish produce through PGIs, as well as the rest of the UK.
And the internal market bill, obviously, if it does kind of complete its process through Westminster, as seems pretty likely now, what is there that the Scottish government or the farmers themselves can do to fight back against some of the potential changes that the UK government could impose?
Well, it's a real challenge to fight back when clause after clause in this internal market bill actually overshadows what good work the common frameworks discussions that are taking place, that were moving forward. The National Farmers Union in Scotland said themselves that they preferred a common framework approach, and that way everybody could work together without this draconian approach. The UK Ag Bill is in the House of Lords now, and they actually voted to protect standards, and so now it will go back to the House of Commons. And we know that probably farmers are expendable, just like fishermen were expendable the last time they had fishing rounds talks with the Common Fisheries Policy.
Well, we are coming on to speak a little bit about fishing now. The UK has reportedly offered a 3-year transition period for European fishing fleets to allow them to prepare for post-Brexit changes as part of an 11th hour deal sweetener. The catches of EU fishermen would be phased down between 2021 and 2024 to offer time for European coastal communities to adapt to the changes. The lengthy transition period is contained in a new negotiating paper tabled ahead of the current round of negotiations in Brussels between the teams respectively led by the UK's chief negotiator David Frost and his EU counterpart Michel Barnier. The idea of a phase-down period had been floated previously, but details had not been provided until recent days. We have a long way to go, but if the other problematic issues can be sorted, it doesn't look like fisheries will stand in the way of an agreement, said one senior EU diplomat. The move comes as the UK signed its first independent fishing deal for 40 years. The deal with Norway involves annual negotiations on share of catch, something the EU has rejected in Brexit talks. Ireland's Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said during a visit to Washington last night that he believed there was a good chance of a trade deal. The obstacles are not insurmountable, he said. We should be able to get this deal done. Kat, we've heard that both sides want to make a deal, but we also know that there have been a lot of bumps along the road. How confident are you that there is a deal that can be done before time runs out?
I think that part of the preparations that the EU has been doing, besides no deal on their side, are contingency plans. I mean, these are professional diplomats, and this is what they do. And I think that this measure, in part, is to help the UK save face. And I don't doubt that they have different measures in place for different scenarios.
And what has the mood been like amongst the governments of Europe? I mean, some of the noises that we've heard have been kind of negative, almost exasperated with the UK. Is that the sort of situation we're in now, where the EU really just wants to get this over and done with?
I think the EU is looking forward to having Scotland as a member state soon.
Well,
I think that they're very sick of it.
Emma, on that, I'll turn to you. The discussion over fishing, as you said, goes back a long way, and fishing communities in Scotland especially have not been well served by the Common Fisheries Policy. Do you think that this transition and a change to how fish stocks are managed will actually benefit Scottish fishers?
I mean, it's really interesting because the fishing is quite complicated, because the fish that we catch in Scottish waters needs to go to Europe, and it needs to go to Europe pretty quick, especially in the case of prawns and langoustines and other fish. And then the fish that we do eat in Scotland comes from Iceland, so cod and others. I'm not a fish expert, but we've heard constantly for the last 4.5 years the challenges and all the fishing negotiations that happen round about November time. Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewan spends a lot of time on it, and we still have a debate every year talking about quotas and process. So I would be really interested to see what the devil in the detail is for this. And I know that the common fisheries policy hasn't been supported by the SNP and has always been something that we've had issues with, because Scotland can't get round the table because we are dictated to by the UK government when it comes to trade issues. So I agree with Kat that what we need is the door's already halfway open for Scotland to get into the EU. And so we need to look forward to being at the table, being able to negotiate so that Scotland can take our own policies and processes forward independently, like a normal country.
And Emma, on a more sort of general note, we had George Caravan on the show last night, and he was fairly confident that there would be some sort of deal muddled out in the next month or two, and that there would be a deal in place. Do you share that kind of confidence that there isn't going to be a complete no deal crash out?
Wow, I think if I was being objective and optimistic, I would hope that we would have some kind of deal that we can just move on and then continue to work out what Scotland really needs to do in the whole process. But there is a huge worry that the UK government have been prepping for a no deal right from day one, because Theresa May said a no deal is better than a bad deal. So they were putting that language into the minds of the people right from day one. So what I would like to see is Scotland independent, so that we can choose our own path and our own deals as we move forward.
Well, we move on now to asylum, and Downing Street has effectively confirmed it is looking at the idea of an Australian-style asylum system where all claimants would be processed in camps outside the UK, saying it is examining what other countries do to deter unofficial sea crossings. Asked about a plan, first reported by the Financial Times, to potentially ship asylum seekers to the South Atlantic for processing, Number 10 played down the destination, but did not dispute the idea of overseas processing centres. A spokesperson also refused to rule out using a Scottish island for this purpose. Australia has been widely criticised by human rights groups for its system of mandatory detention for asylum seekers inside camps in locations such as Nauru, while the lengthy process of examining claims takes place. Asked about the idea of the UK doing this, Boris Johnson's spokesperson said the UK had a long and proud history of accepting asylum seekers, but needed to act, particularly given migrants making crossings from France in small boats. As ministers have said, we are developing plans to reform policies and laws around illegal migration and asylum to ensure that we are able to provide protection to those who need it, while preventing abuse of the system and the criminality associated with it, he said. Emma, is this anything like a proportionate response to the kind of asylum claims that Britain has to deal with?
I think that the language around asylum seekers, it's almost like these are people who are a scourge, and that's completely not what people who are fleeing from war-torn countries need to be facing when they are trying to escape to come to a place that they think that they could be welcomed. I know that for us in Scotland, we welcome our asylum seekers. We want them to come here. We need them because our population needs younger people, and many of these people are skilled as well. So I would support basically immigration being devolved to Scotland so that we can welcome asylum seekers and help support them without having to be burdened by the government.
Kat, we've seen obviously over the last few years a lot of discussion about immigration across Europe and indeed elsewhere in the world as well. What do you make of this kind of language from the UK government suggesting that they are going to kind of ghettoize asylum seekers somewhere. It was Ascension Island that was mentioned. What does that kind of how does that affect you when you hear that?
Well, I think that one of the things we have to remember is that many of these people are climate refugees.
Mm,
And when you start using the language climate refugee, you start to go, well, is that very ecologically friendly to be going to the South Pacific to process them and then bring them back? Um, I think the language around asylum seekers needs to change. And then also, the further away you get from home is where the human rights abuses happen.
mm,
And the closer they are, so I also would say when I saw that they might send them to Scotland, I thought that would be fine. That would be the best for them. That would be the best for human rights, the
mm.
climate, everything else. So I think that this is very, very disturbing on many levels.
Yeah, we've also just recently seen the EU announce a migration pact to try and manage the flow of people, because obviously Greece and Italy have been so kind of on the front line, and other countries less willing to take some of those refugees off their hands. I wonder, do you think that will have much impact on the flow of people towards Britain through Europe?
I'm afraid that's not really an area that I'm
Mm,
that familiar with.
fair
I
enough.
think that the UK has done all it can to make itself seem unattractive to
Mm,
asylum seekers.
mm,
Mm.
that's fair enough. Well, we move on to something where I suspect you may have a bit more to say. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden battled over Trump's record on the coronavirus pandemic, healthcare, and the economy in a chaotic and bad tempered first debate marked by personal insults and Trump's repeated interruptions. Trump bulldozed his way through the 90-minute debate, trying to goad Biden nearly every time he spoke, claiming that Democrats were trying to steal the November presidential election with mail in ballots, and declining to condemn white supremacist groups when asked to do so. Trump also attacked Biden's son, Hunter, and made bizarre claims, including that insulin was so cheap it was now like water. In fact, in much of the US, one bottle of insulin can cost up to $300. At one point, an exasperated Biden said after Trump's repeated interruptions, "Will you shut up, man? This is so unpresidential." Moderator Chris Wallace of Fox News tried in vain to reel Trump in, who ignored his time limits and talked over Biden almost constantly. Jeremy Stahl, a journalist with The Slate, calculated that Trump made a total of 128 interruptions during the debate. Kat, did you have a good night last night?
I wish I could have been asleep during the debate, but I have had a lot of sleepless nights, and last night was one of them.
So how did you feel watching that debate? Did you feel Biden did well given Trump's kind of constant harassment?
I think he did. I think part of the shut up man has been Biden's style throughout all debates throughout his political career, and that was sort of more acceptable coming from him than it would be from another politician. Uh, Joe Biden also has a stutter that's been well reported,
Mm,
and interrupting someone is a great way to aggravate a stutter. So it really was Trump playing dirty as usual.
yeah. I mean, is it true that Democrats, like you, for example, are trying to steal the election using postal voting?
I am voting from abroad like I have for the whole 4 years I've lived here. I voted in the 2016 election from here. My state allows fax-in
Mm,
voting, and I already voted, and I already got uh, my ballot was received by the state of Florida, so also a
mhm,
swing state. Um, so I think that mail-in ballots have always been a Republican thing. President Trump votes by mail, and this is just a bunch of misinformation.
mm. What do you think is the end goal of this? I mean, we've heard a number of observers suggesting that he's trying to undermine credibility in the election so much that he will be able to stay in power even if he loses. Is that a valid concern, do you think?
I think it's valid. Maybe not as straight up as people think that he's going to try and stay in the White House, because I think, or just refuse to leave and have the military behind him, because the military largely isn't behind him right now. But I don't think that he has a very detailed plan. I think he's trying to sow chaos and confusion and erode trust in the institution as much as he can, so that any little handhold, you know how litigious he is, you know how transactional he is, he's going to try every dirty trick in the book.
And given the potential appointment of another conservative Supreme Court justice before the election, does that worry you when you think about the potential for the election ending up in the court again?
That worries me less about the election making it to the court, because the Supreme Court is, in the US Constitution, it is a lot more powerful than the courts in the UK or in Scotland. And once those justices are appointed to the court, they work as a unit. They're 12 jurors that function as one judge, if you will, or one juror body. So there's a lot of nuance to it, and the Supreme Court is fairly confusing for people that grew up learning about it. But I worry more about the future implications. But I worry about the Supreme Court giving Trump the election less than most other things.
And on the Supreme Court appointment, obviously this is quite controversial given what happened with Merrick Garland in 2016, where the Senate refused to hold a hearing on him. And it does look like they're going to rush one through for Coney Barrett, I think her name is. It does look like they're going to squeeze that in before the election. Do you think that kind of bad manners, I guess, will have a longer term impact on politics in the US?
I do. I think it'll have an effect on the ballots in November, because what has been Trump's and the Senate's main attraction? They said, we'll give you the courts, we'll get you these Supreme Court justices. If they fill it, why is there a reason to vote for them?
And just briefly, you said you're from Florida. It is obviously one of the most important swing states. Are you getting the impression from friends and family at home that Florida might be leaning towards Biden just now?
Well, I'm a Florida voter, but I'm actually from Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
So my grandparents are the only people I talk to in Florida, and they are Democrats, straight ticket Democrats my entire life. My Wisconsin family, there are conservatives and there are Republicans, and there are some Trump voters, but most of them are not. Most of them are conservative in a way that it does not match with the values of Donald Trump.
So
and Joe Biden, who is a lifelong Catholic, is a lot less risky for them.
So those are, Wisconsin, of course, is in play this time around as well. Do you get the feeling that it may swing back to Democratic this time?
I don't. My crystal ball is really, really broken. But I will say, Wisconsin will probably go Democrat. I would call it Democrat, if anything else, because people are more civically engaged there than in a lot of parts of the U.S. And it's always 50-50. It's always really, really close. And also the Republican state legislature has not been, people in the state are not happy with them.
Yeah, of course, that can have an impact that maybe we don't see from our distance. We do unfortunately have to move on now, but thank you so much for your insights, Kat. We move on now, though, and Rwandan genocide suspect Felicien Kabuga can be handed over to United Nations Tribunal in Tanzania. France's top civil court ruled today, dismissing his lawyer's arguments that he is too frail to be extradited. UN prosecutors accused the former tea and coffee tycoon of bankrolling and importing huge numbers of machetes for ethnic Hutu militias, who killed hundreds of thousands of Tutsis and moderate Hutus in Rwanda during a 100-day period in 1994. Kabuga's arrest in Paris in May ended a manhunt lasting more than 2 decades. He has denounced the charges, including genocide and incitement to commit genocide, as lies. His lawyers said that at 87 he was too frail to be transferred abroad, especially during a dangerous coronavirus pandemic. The French courts list his age as 84. Emma, if I could come to you on this. The Rwandan genocide, it was huge news in the mid 90s, and then we have talked a lot less about it since then. It's really important, though, I think, to remember that suspects are still out there and still need to face justice, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When this was, when I was made aware of this, one of my concerns was that obviously the rule of law needs to be followed, and we have heard of other people that have committed crimes of genocide in the past that have faced a trial, even if they were older. So my support or my goal would be that if someone is suspected of these terrible crimes, that they should face the full force of the law.
And Kat, we talk, for example, we talked recently on the show about the massacre in the Balkans. We've talked about the Holocaust, but the Rwandan genocide does seem to get forgotten a wee bit. Do you have any idea why that is?
I think part of it is it's more recent. People don't want to think about it. And people like to think about genocide as being something that we're past. I unfortunately think that it is not white people. And if you think of other genocides like in Serbia and stuff, that's more memorialized than in Rwanda. And unfortunately, there's not enough attention paid to it.
Yeah. Yeah, we will obviously keep an eye on that as Mr. Kabuga faces trial, presumably sometime relatively soon. But back in Scotland now, and views are to be sought on extending the current arrangements for early medical abortion at home once coronavirus is no longer a significant threat. During the pandemic, women have been able to take both pills required for an early medical abortion at home, where it is considered clinically appropriate. The current arrangements will remain in place as long as the virus remains a risk, but a wide range of views, including from women who have had the treatment, are now being sought through a consultation on making the current arrangements permanent. Kat, what do you make of this consultation on potentially making abortion at home easier?
Well, I first read about it today, and I guess my questions would be, have there been any issues with it in the time that it's been used? Because I know of people who have had miscarriages that use the same procedure, and I don't really see the difference. If it is safer, if it's more efficient, if it's helping out the NHS, if it's helping out the patient, I don't really see a downside in it. If it's already legal, why not make it more accessible? That's going to be better for families. It's going to be better for women. It's going to be better for society.
Emma, obviously, pro-life campaigners are going to look at this and say that it's another cheapening of human life. It's making abortion easier, kind of making it less difficult for women to make that decision. How do you respond to those kinds of criticisms?
Well, I look forward to the consultation because it's going to look at the whole issue of safety, and I've actually had some casework during COVID directly related to this issue. My goal is that women should be the ones that choose what they do and not be dictated to by somebody else telling them how to decide what they want to do for their body. No woman enters into a decision to choose to end a pregnancy lightly. It's a massive decision, but what we need to do is be able to have total healthcare, wraparound support, make sure women are supported, and that this, if it does continue outside of COVID, we need to make sure it's done as safely as possible. So I don't want to preempt the consultation, but I'm sure within the next couple of days, my inbox will be full of people who support it and people who object to it. And obviously, I will be responding to people as it comes forward.
On a more general note, Emma, obviously the NHS has had to reconfigure itself in quite a few different ways during the pandemic. What's been your general feeling about that? And do you think there are other things that the NHS might change permanently now going forwards that they've learned from the pandemic?
Well, I'm very interested in what the NHS is doing. We've spoken at Health Committee. I'm Deputy Convener of the Health Committee. So we've taken evidence about remobilisation and how things can be done different. We know that having digital opportunities for patients to see their GP, for instance, so that might allow actually better equality and inclusion, because people that don't have a car, instead of driving a 150-mile round trip from Stranraer to Dumfries, would maybe be able to see their GP or their specialist nurse or their appointments that they need remotely. And that actually is something that we're hearing a lot about, that the opportunities for digital engagement is very, very good. So in our report at Health Committee, we'll be talking about the benefits or what has come out of the NHS in this rapid adjustment to lockdown and then supporting patients. And I am keen to see what our report comes up with.
And Kat, just to ask you quite quickly, obviously you grew up in the US with the medical system that there is there. How's your experience been of the NHS? Are you one of these people who comes here and goes, "Oh yeah, this is what we need," or are you a wee bit more kind of a wee bit more fond of the American system?
Oh, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that's more fond of the American system. And actually, being in the military, I had excellent health coverage, and still I spent so much time on the phone being misbilled and arguing with people whose job it was basically, it made a job, I guess, to make these errors that needed to be fixed. So the NHS is one of the reasons we decided to move here. I can't thank the NHS enough, and I can't express how much more or how grateful we are that we live here during this pandemic and not in the US.
Yeah, it's always nice to hear an outsider's perspective on it. So thank you for that. Sorry, yes, Emma, go ahead.
Well, you spoke earlier about Donald Trump, and I know Kat will have experience of American insurance, but if Donald Trump is saying that insulin is really, really cheap, he's wrong. It's not. And if you are someone like me who's a type 1 diabetic, you need syringes, you need needles, you need pump supplies, you need all the disposables. It's not just about a bottle of insulin, it's about the best healthcare that goes along with that for proper glycemic control so that people can look after themselves. So I think flippant remarks by the president when healthcare really needs to be the primary thing that we do to look after the people in a nation. And that is a really crucial point that you made about insulin and Donald Trump's comment.
Well, I have type 1 diabetes as well, which is why I made sure that was in there, because I was just, my mind was blown when I heard him saying that. But anyway.
I think I know where that came.
Sorry?
I think I know where that toss-off remark came from, is that Bernie Sanders had taken people up to Canada to get insulin, and that was part of his plan. And I think that hit really well. I think it made really good traction with some of Donald Trump's base, and he was just trying to say, "Hey, I'll do this like Bernie did," which he can.
Well, that might explain it. I'm glad we've got somebody who's got some insight into how Donald Trump's brain works. But speaking of medicine, we move on now. And the University of St Andrews will be able to award medical and dentistry degrees through a new bill introduced to the Scottish Parliament, which amends existing legislation to give it the same rights as other universities. The University of St Andrews Degrees in Medicine and Dentistry Bill is being brought forward so that the Fife University can award, jointly with the University of Dundee, primary medical qualifications to Scottish Graduate Entry Medicine (MBCHB) students in advance of the first student cohort graduating in 2022. A legislative prohibition, which means the institution can't award degrees in medicine and dentistry, was put in place by the Universities Scotland Act 1966 to allow the separation of Queen's College in Dundee from the University of St Andrews in order to form the University of Dundee. As it serves no legitimate purpose in today's context, its removal would create a fairer higher education sector in Scotland, enabling all institutions to maximise the options and opportunities that they offer to students in Scotland. So, Emma, I was not even aware of this, that St Andrews couldn't award these degrees. This seems like something that's possibly a wee bit overdue, isn't it?
Well, definitely. I mean, what we need to be able to do in Scotland is to train our own and retain our own. And the Scottish Graduate Entry to Medicine is a great programme that has been implemented by Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman so that we can get doctors trained who had a medical degree or some kind of degree already. So people who are pharmacists, people who are nurses, people who are physicians' assistants can then go ahead and be trained so that we can have our future doctors ready, to continue to work here in Scotland.
And do you have any idea how quickly this bill will move through Parliament?
Well, if it's been introduced before the end of this session, my understanding is that we would have it approved by the end of this parliamentary session. So that's next May. And that would be obviously something that I would support as it'll come to the Health and Sport Committee for us to scrutinise. So there's many bills that have been dropped because of COVID and parliamentary processes, but this is one of the ones that I'm hoping will go forward.
Yeah, well, obviously for those students, it will be something quite important. But we move on to our last story now, and people on low incomes will be eligible to receive a new £500 grant if asked to self-isolate. The new self-isolation support grant will help those who would lose income if they needed to self-isolate, such as those unable to carry out their work from home. This grant is for those who will face financial hardship due to being asked to self-isolate and will be targeted at people who are in receipt of universal credit or legacy benefits, with some discretion to make awards to others in financial hardship. Applications are due to open from the 12th of October and will be delivered through the existing Scottish Welfare Fund, which is administered by local authorities. And Kat, I mean, this is something that seems quite obvious that there might need to be a wee bit of extra support for people who are having to self-isolate. What do you make of the support that the Scottish Government has been providing so far through the pandemic?
I think that, well, from what I hear from other people, since I'm on a visa, so a lot of that is outside my reality. But I've heard from so many people that it's meant the world to them, and I think that this extra boost is going to encourage people to be safe and to do the smart thing and to isolate when they're supposed to. And I think that is so crucial. And it's also very important for the trust in the government.
Yeah. Yeah, Emma, we've talked a wee bit about this trust in the government yesterday when the Scottish Social Attitude Survey was published. But it has made a big difference, hasn't it? Nicola Sturgeon's approach to this, the kind of language that she's used and the kind of policies that the Scottish Government has tried to introduce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a complete contrast in the message that the First Minister puts forward, where she recognises that this time is really difficult, and when she asks people to be kind and be caring, that is a complete contrast in compared to other language that's put out there. This fund I welcome, because we've had people that actually have jobs that are now accessing food banks. And the rise of access of food banks has been just phenomenal since COVID and lockdown. So I support the First Minister's approach. We know that people who are furloughed are right on that breadline. And I think if we can do anything at all to support people, we need to be able to help people.
Well, that is just about a perfect place to end. So I'd like to thank Kat Cary and Emma Harper very much for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking to both of you. And thank you to you at home for joining us as well. There would be no point in making the shows if we didn't have you. So thank you very much for being with us. We do have to ask, if you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up there as a supporter, and your £5 a month helps us to keep going here at Broadcasting Scotland. It's virtually our only source of income, and it's the only way we can keep the lights on here at Broadcasting Scotland, much less grow and develop into the broadcaster we believe our country deserves. If you're not able to support us financially, we do absolutely understand, but you can still do us a huge favour by following us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot, by liking our Facebook page, by subscribing to our YouTube channel and clicking the bell icon while you're there. And then sharing the shows around with people on your social media. Let people know why you support Broadcasting Scotland. Word of mouth is by far the best way for us to spread the word about what we do here at Broadcasting Scotland, and you can be a big part of that. And finally, we have asked many times, but we are always in need of new people to help out here at Broadcasting Scotland. Behind the scenes and in front of the camera, there are lots of opportunities here. So if you're interested in helping us build that better broadcaster, then do please get in touch with us as soon as you can. We would absolutely love to have you. But that is absolutely all we have time for tonight. So once again, thank you so much to Emma Harper MSP and to Kat Cary. Gordon will be back again tomorrow with another Scotland at 7. I'll be back on Friday for another special edition, and then back again on Sunday with the full Scottish. But until then, thanks so much for joining us, and have a great evening. Good night.